And welcome back to another Therapy Thursday. I'm here with Dr. Peter, and we're going to be talking about something that applies to everyone, and it's how your foot contacts the ground when running, when lifting. If you have a lack of stability or a lack of mobility in the foot or in the ankle, we're going to talk today about how that can cause up-chain problems in the knees and the hips. I want to talk about the heel strike to start. Why is heel striking not only a problem for a runner, but why does it cause pain up chain? What's going on in the foot and the knees and the hips? And what's happening here?
Well, when you heel strike, you really just, all the pressure is on the heel and you're not using the arch and the muscles of the foot to absorb the pressure. So if you hit the heel, power is going to go up right through the bones of the body and it's causing pain right there. So it's a lot harder hit than it should be. Your muscles are supposed to absorb and then right away from there push off to the next step. So it's easier to have a land onto the forefoot, the muscles are engaged, and you can push off right away again.
So in summary, landing on the heel not only puts the impact of the load into the bone, but it's actually eliminating us to turn on the muscles we need to use.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely correct. That's the difference between walking and running. When you walk, it's normal to have a heel strike, go to a toe off.
Right.
With running, you need to stay a little bit more onto the mid and forefoot and engage those muscles so they can absorb the power.
So when we're looking at that heel strike being okay when walking, right?
Yep.
So as the person's striding down, right, the foot's gonna go out in front of them. When we're running, okay, we wanna land with the foot more underneath us so that we can propel the stride or propel the energy into the next stride. So this gets into the forefoot strike. Now, what's happening when we do a forefoot strike? What's the advantage there? And furthermore, what is too much forefoot and what's just right?
Well, the problem with too much forefoot is that you start straining the tendons of the ankle, especially the posterior tibialis. And so a lot of people get shin splints because of that.
And that's interesting you say posterior tibialis because I've got a client, a triathlete I'm working out with right now named Valerie, and she's got problems with her posterior tibialis on the right leg. And you know, it's funny that you would highlight immediately that overstriking on the forefoot can cause that. I noticed a lot of people wanted to use the Hoka shoe, which is heel elevated, a lot of support. Tell me more about all of this. What's going on there?
Well, shoe wear is very independent. I mean, for some people, a lower heel is better. Some people, a high heel is better. That comes down to how much mobility you have right away into dorsiflexion of your ankle.
Okay.
And so lack of dorsiflexion, if you have that as a runner, you may be better served with having a little bit thicker heel so you can take some of the pressure off the ankle joint. You know, and so that's why they're quite comfortable. Shoes change all the time, as you very well know. You know, we've gone to barefoot running, we've gone to minimalistic shoes, then we go to really absorbent shoes again. It really is very specific, and you need to look at what's the mobility of the ankle, especially in dorsiflexion, and what's the stability in pronation and supination. And all those need to be addressed if there's issues with either one of those. How
is the the forefoot striking? What's happening that's causing the posterior tibialis to be one of the markers of we're having pain here because it's overflowing?
Well, if you're on the forefoot, there's very little stability to the foot, and the posterior tibialis being right there as it inserts to the forefoot is the one that's got to take up all the power right through there, especially if coupled with some pronation. So if you have difficulty with shin splints, you got to look and see, you know, what's your running posture like? Are you too much on your forefoot? Are you hinging too much forward? Because those things are quite common. Also, can be an issue if we're looking at running hills. When you run a lot of uphills, downhills, you're changing your body position accordingly, which may strain your foot some more. So posterior tibialis is named that way because it attaches on the posterior aspect, the back portion of your tibia, the main bone in your lower leg, and then it goes underneath the foot and attaches onto the first ray. And you can see right here, this is one of the few muscles coming all the way down to the forefoot. So if you're landing too much on your forefoot, the only muscle that's really helping you absorb the pressure is your posterior tibialis. And it's going to get really stretched out, and so people get either plantar fasciitis or shin splints when there's too much loading onto that tendon. And so you want to land on the forefoot, but not extreme.
So when we tell people to land on the forefoot, that would be to land on this padded area of the foot here. But that doesn't mean that you should stay locked in that position.
Correct.
And what happens is a lot of times people, they feel like if I'm going to land on my toe, that means my heel can't touch the floor. And so they overexert the force. They don't allow the arch to work fully. they start to overwork the wrong muscles, hence the posterior tibialis being one of them. So it's really cool that we were able to discuss that, being that Valerie has that issue right now.
Yep, and it's very common in runners, and it comes down to, you know, landing mechanics, and it also comes down to just what's going on with the whole leg. Hip mobility, knee mobility, ankle mobility is all tied together. So it could go from the foot up. It could also come from the hip down, and so it's important to evaluate that. And so that's very important. Orthotics can help if there is a problem with the foot, but sometimes it needs a little bit more dynamic change.
Gotcha. So we're looking at the heel strike versus the forefoot strike, but what's going on with the arch during all of this? And so I'd really like to talk to you about what's going on with my feet. I like to run a lot, and I'm in no pain. But one of the things I've learned about my feet is, as you can see, if I just relax, I'm very flat-footed. Now, what I've learned is that if I don't engage my glutes as I stand, which naturally brings the arch up, if I turn my glutes off, as you can see, my arch collapses. But when I turn my glutes on, it kind of externally rotates my femur, which helps establish at least some arch. When I don't stand like this, like I'm pinching my butt, I'll notice a pain, my low back starts to flex, my hip flexors start to bother me. Now, as I run, I make sure that when I'm landing, I land with a soft pad. So I've been very fortunate to develop a nice, efficient running stride to where I'm pain-free. But what happens with people when I notice that as they're running, a lot of times the foot tracks behind them, and as it comes behind them, it'll turn out, but then it stays there and they land foot turned out forward, right? I've even seen some people, they get that forward chirp kind of going to where they're landing on the forefoot, but they're still turning out kind of like this, right? I'm being dramatic. How much of the glute is involved in the establishment of the arch, and how much of it is the arch, you know, chicken or the egg, causing either a strong or a weak glute?
Well, the effect is both ways.
Okay.
And so it really is not the chicken or the egg, because they're both there, and one of them wasn't sooner than the other. Your video showed it perfectly. You know, if your arches are collapsing, you get internal rotation of the tibia, internal rotation of the femur, and therefore, you know, your glutes are negatively affected that way.
Okay.
Reverse, as you engage your glutes, a little bit more external rotation, and now you're standing a little bit with a little bit more arch into your foot. Now, you're very aware of that, but a lot of people are not aware of this at all. And so they just run, and they don't really pay much attention to what they're doing. They may pay attention to their feet, but not about, you know, what happens above and below.
Right.
So having an active core, having a good posture with a little bit of glute involvement is key. The foot coming out, there's a little bit of an internal rotation of the hip. So if you have a lot of tension into internal rotation, your feet may come out more. Oftentimes those are people that run kind of with their knees together and their feet come out. Another problem, Lane, we see commonly with runners is plantar fasciitis. And one of the main things I look at first is there enough dorsiflexion in the big toe? Because the toe is the last part that you push off with. And so if you don't have enough extension in your big toe, meaning your toe has to come up like this, right? If you don't have adequate mobility there, that's going to put additional strain on your plantar fascia. Then with running of the repeated, you know, think about how many strikes you take in a couple mile run, can really lead to problems.
You know, it's interesting, my triathlon coach, John Potato with Powerhouse, we were working together and we're doing lunges. I'm working with him on his strength programming as he works with me on my endurance. And one of the things we noticed was it's his right toe. I think he broke it a couple years ago. And so as we're lunging, when he goes to step forward, that causes him discomfort to find this position because of the lack of range in that big toe. So he'll accidentally kind of find space by turning that back leg in more often than not, and I have to remind him to try to keep it there. Although, if we're not careful, it can cause a little bit of pain. Now, with him, he broke his toe, and you know, so this is something he's gonna have to deal with. But let's just say I'm a runner. I've never broken my big toe, and I can't do a simple lunge without feeling pain in the toe when it flexes. You know, what would you recommend I do? Is there anything I can
Actually, yes. Stretching your big toe is helpful. So you can just go into that painful position and do some repeated movements there. Or you can even do a little bit of self-mobilization on your toe. So come sit down for me. And what you do is you're going to grab your toe, give it basically a little bit of distraction, and then just pull it up as far as you can. So you can self-mobilize your big toe like that. Little distraction, then go up. And then from there, go back to that painful position again, and do that repeatedly. Work into that range of motion, because what you saw there with the lunging is what happens with people with running. They don't have big toe extension, so something has got to give a little bit. The body's going to find the easiest way to still make that happen, and so you turn your leg in or out a little bit to still allow for good mobility.
Right.
And now something is getting sacrificed. Oftentimes that's the plantar fascia, or you start having shin splints, or you start having hip impingements. And so the IT band is always blamed for that. It's an easy person to blame. But oftentimes it's much lower, and it starts with the big toe, because the big toe is the one that takes off every step you take. All right. In summary, I think what we need to know is that running, weightlifting, whatever you do, we use our feet quite a bit and abuse our feet quite a bit. We need to have proper mobility, proper stability, and just because you have pain in your feet or anywhere in your legs doesn't mean that that's the cause of your problem. You need to look up chain as well as down chain. So hip problems can cause foot problems, and foot problems can cause hip problems, and your knee is stuck in between at risk as well. So next week we'll dive into a new subject. Thank you so much for checking in.